This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes.
I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad from Guidehouse Insights.
I'm Rebecca Linland from Rebecca Drives.
You're from The Rock, because we're doing Zoom, so I can see The Rock.
The Rock of the Treehouse.
Right. Mount Linland.
People thought it was a backdrop.
Yeah.
They thought it was a fake backdrop. I'm like, no, that's The Rock.
Nothing fake here.
Who would ever expect a boulder in somebody's office like that?
Yeah. It's pretty good. All right, well, let's talk about what we've been driving, and I think we should start with the gas car, go to the hybrids, and then finish with the gas stuff. So, Sam, you had the Altima with the funky, weird, variable compression turbo engine. What'd you think?
So it was kind of a mixed bag. The Altima, the current generation Altima is a generally a nice enough car. I've driven it before, and we've talked about it in the past. It's pleasant. Drives fine. It's roomy. I have no real complaints about the design. One complaint I did have previously was the where the hood line, because the hood is one of these modern ones that kind of wraps over the sides, so the cut line is along the sides rather than on the top, and they do that for better pedestrian protection because of the way the metal folds out if a pedestrian lands on the hood. But the cut line, at the back, as it comes up to the A-pillar, it goes up and, then across. And on the last couple of Altimas I drove, that gap seemed to be really large, and it didn't seem to be particularly well aligned. And it seemed like the stamping for the hood panel was actually not, almost not folded over quite enough as much as it should have been to get everything really lined up nicely. And this one definitely seemed better. It seemed like a more even gap all the way around. So that was good. So they made progress there.
You didn't get your hammer out and try to fix it yourself?
No.
Flatten it out.
Do you remember though, last summer I had, I think it was the Murano, that it was so pronounced, like the misalignment was so pronounced that I actually told them, I said, you guys need to fix this because it wasn't okay.
I remember you talking about it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I had mentioned that. I had mentioned that to Nissan when I had the first time I had the Altima as well. I told them, I said, hey, I noticed this, and, while I had it, I actually drove over to the local Nissan dealer here to look at the other Altimas that were on the lot to compare it. And they were all the same way. So clearly the early production of examples of the current generation Altima, had some issues there, and it seems to be better now. I mean, it's still a comparatively large gap, but it's not as bad as it was, or at least my impression is it's not as bad as it was.
Is that something you think, I know we notice it and it bugs us, but is that something you think that they can get away with a lot more than we might think automaker wise, because general customers don't tend to care as much? I mean, we've talked about body gaps on Teslas and stuff too, and it's the same thing. People don't seem as concerned about it as we do.
Teslas are different though.
Yeah, I think you're right, Rebecca. Tesla's, Tesla owners, tend to be more lenient. I think most customers, I think it depends on the price point and kind of like what segment you're in. I think if you're talking about a $15,000 car, customers are going to be a little more lenient. When you're talking about a almost $39,000 car, maybe a little less so.
Really? The Altima costs $40,000?
This one did, yeah.
Wow.
This is the Platinum, with the turbo engine. It was, just shy of $39,000. And, which takes me, to, and I think, the hood alignment, or that hood gap, I think is less of an issue than some of the other things inside, which I hadn't really dwelled on that much the previous time I drove the Altima. So this particular Altima they finally launched the upgraded version, or the premium version, with the 2-liter VC turbo engine. So this is the variable compression turbo charged 4-cylinder that they launched last year in the Infiniti QX50. And, this is designed to replace a V6 in this kind of application, give the similar power output to a V6. And, it's probably not quite as, in terms of pure power, it's not as good as the the V6 they had in here. It's 236 horsepower, but it's got 267 pounds-feet of torque, which is great. And no complaints about the performance of the engine. And what's unique about this thing, if you look inside, it's got this linkage that actually moves the there's a linkage attached to the connecting rods that changes how much of a compression ratio you get, and it's continuously variable. It's bizarre to look at, and to think that this could actually work, but it actually works really well. And the engine I found was actually really smooth. And back when they first announced it, year and a half, 2 years ago, I think it was at the LA Auto Show. I was talking to the chief engineer for the engine from Nissan, and I was asking him about some of the things about this. And one of the things he mentioned, because there's no balance shaft on this one, he said they actually didn't need a balance shaft because the way this thing is set up, the relationship between the pistons and the crankshaft, it's kind of offset, and you actually have, one of the things that causes balance issues in an engine is the angle, the side forces. So the piston normally goes up and down in the cylinder, and the connecting rods swing back and forth as the crankshaft goes around. Well, because of the way this thing works, the angles there, when those connecting rods swing back and forth, that actually puts side forces from the piston on the cylinder walls, and those side forces are part of the imbalance you get in a four-cylinder engine. And this actually has lower side forces, significantly lower side forces than a conventional four-cylinder. So it's actually a really smooth engine. It doesn't seem to vibrate as much as even engines that have balance shafts on them. Well, so that part's really good.
Yeah, it's probably, I would assume as well, that they can crank the compression ratio down for stuff like idling, where higher compression is gonna wobble more, but it still I'm assuming, because it's a four-cylinder, it still has that sort of rocking couple, right? Where you got either two pistons down and two up at all times, and so it's
but it is reduced.
Yeah.
So you feel it less in this engine than you would in a conventional four-cylinder.
I will have to pay more attention to that the next time I have the VC Turbo.
Yeah. So I like the engine. One of the reasons why they did this, why they claim they did this, was for better fuel efficiency. Better fuel efficiency compared to the V6. And I think the claim was like 27% better fuel efficiency relative to the 3.5 liter V6 that they have used in the past in the Altima.
That's kind of a low bar.
Yeah, well, it was okay. Its EPA rating on this is 29 miles per gallon combined, which is pretty impressive. I averaged about 26, so I was a little shy of that. But it's acceptable for a non-hybrid midsize sedan. I think it's pretty decent. But getting back to that price point of $39,000, after having had the new Sonata just a couple of weeks before I drove this one, it was really noticeable. Even though this was the platinum trim level, the highest trim level, it had this fake wood trim across the dashboard. And the thing that really caught my eye that for some reason I hadn't really noticed before was the trim around the center display. So, like most modern vehicles, it's got the stand-up touchscreen display in the middle of the dash, that looks kind of like a tablet perched up there. And the plastic trim around that looked really cheap. I mean, it was a couple of, it looked like a couple of pieces snapped together, and I'll include a picture of that in the post so you can see. But compared to how premium that new Sonata feels, this really felt like a car that should be significantly less expensive than that car. It didn't seem like it was in the same class, even though it clearly is very much in a direct competitor to the Sonata. The interior did not feel like it should be in the same segment.
I think, I remember years ago driving with the notorious Bob Lutz, and he said some of the standards that he was trying to implement at GM, in particular fit and finish, was actually from Hyundai. And he felt like they had some of the best metrics. and the best, gap measurements, things like that. And I never forgot that, because that was more than 10 years ago. And we're really starting to see the fruition of that attention to detail in the Hyundai and Kia and Genesis products, the three of them. But I think that Nissan has really been kind of caught flat-footed in a lot of ways by the emergence of Hyundai and Kia as really, really good products, really, standard bearers of what can be done when you pay attention.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I think that bears out in Nissan's success or lack thereof in the marketplace in the last few years. I think people are going out and shopping for these vehicles, and this is why even though Nissan is pricing their vehicles competitively with the rest of the market, you often find substantial discounts on them, and I think for the last several years they've had among the highest rate of fleet sales. And, if you go look at rental car fleets, you'll usually find almost more Nissans than pretty much anything else these days.
Yeah, no, it's true.
Well, that party is over.
Yeah.
The Altima is a good car, and like fundamentally, I like this generation of it. But I think you're right, Sam, especially in this shrunken market for sedans. If you're cross shopping with the other options out there, you start to see what Nissan has been doing, and it's almost like they took their eye off the ball of sort of offering value, and they said, how can we make this, like, we've improved it where we need to improve it. It's definitely competitive in the market, but it also, you look and you see where they've cheapened it, or they've just built it to a cost. And that doesn't make it bad, but when you're looking at something like the Sonata, I agree, because I spent some time in that too, and I was astounded by how solid and premium that car feels, to the point where I'm also curious if Hyundai is pulling the old Toyota trick of maybe not making any money on that car to gain market share.
That's possible, but the thing is, every manufacturer, part of developing a product, whether it's a car or any other product, is to understand. You obviously want to take out, if you're going to run a business successfully, you need to take out cost where it makes sense, where it's not going to have a functional impact. So ideally you don't want to reduce the functionality of your product by taking out cost, but at the same time, you need to do it in a way that is not going to impact the customer experience or the thing. And especially in something like a car, a car is something so complex. There's a lot of ways that you can take cost out in areas that are not necessarily going to be immediately visible to the customer. You look at a dashboard. There's a lot of pieces that go into a typical dashboard. And you find a lot of seams and things like that. And the goal is to design it in such a way that those seams are hidden, so they're not visible. And the problem with the Sonata versus the Altima, I'm sure the Sonata, Hyundai engineers are doing the same kinds of things, to try to take out cost, take out mass. That's part of the goal. The less it costs you to build it, the more profit margin you get on it. What the problem with the Altima is, some of these things that they did are like right there, where you can, right in front of you, where you cannot possibly miss seeing it. And that's the kind of place where you want to take more care, where it's right there next to the touch screen, which you're going to be looking at a lot, to use anything. And you want those seams to be invisible, and they didn't do that.
And the thing too is that, like we were talking about, like, will that customer notice? That may be the discussion that they have. Oh, that won't matter. This customer won't notice. But if somebody else like Hyundai says, let's give this customer the most value, because then maybe eventually they'll buy an even more expensive car, then you have that comparison. So if you operate in a vacuum and say, oh, you know what, historically, this customer hasn't really cared about fit and finish or materials or, you know, seams in the dash and such. But if somebody else cares, then all of a sudden that design matters and that attention to detail does start to matter, and you start losing your competitive edge. And I think that's a lot of what's happened at Nissan. I think a lot of their products are still good. It's just that other, you know, whether it's Mazda or Hyundai or somebody else, they've emerged as really, really worthy competitors. And I just feel like Nissan hasn't kept up.
I mean, you just described what happened in the 80s, right?
Yeah.
like or 70s and 80s, where GM was like, people don't care about that. And they had so much market share that they didn't feel like they needed to worry. And then you had the upstarts that, you know, their cars were little jewels. And
yeah, no, I mean, that in the 70s for sure. And then GM and Detroit started making bad copies of Japanese vehicles. And that's not why people wanted them. You know, they were buying Japanese vehicles for a variety of reasons. But yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Yeah. And it's so, I think you can't get away with it on the interiors though, Sam. I think like, especially if it's right there. And even if people are cross shopping, they're going to sit in the Sonata and the first thing they're going to notice is how nice it is and how good it looks and how nice everything feels. And that's absolutely going to stick with you. You can get away with a lot more on the bodywork, I think, than inside, because that's like you're staring at it all the time, every mile of every drive. So that actually has to be good, and I think it does very quickly lead to a decision to purchase or not purchase. All right, let's jump around because we've got the hybrids. I want to do the hybrids all at once, or the non-hybrids all at once. So Rebecca, you had the Lexus GS 350, and that's a dead car rolling.
Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
I did. So this was actually, I had it a couple of weeks ago. And one of the things that I did with it was to drive down to Long Island. Oh my God. Island. So I go from...
Where on Long Island?
So I had to go to... oh my gosh, what was the name of the town? I'll look it up. It wasn't
I had to
far.
go to Bethpage. I had to play some golf.
Actually, you know, oh my God, I think it was Bethpage.
They got that course there, Bethpage Black, right?
I've been to Bethpage Black. So one of my closest friends, her parents live on Long Island, and I had something for her mom, specifically knitting yarn. So I said, you know what, this is a perfect time because ordinarily, even though it's maybe like 45 miles, it's normally like an hour and a half drive because of traffic, right? Mm-hmm. So this was the end of April, I think it was. And so I talked to her mom and I was like, hey, listen, you know, it's a gorgeous day. Do you mind if I pop down? And it was unbelievable because I actually got there in just under an hour. And we sat outside with masks on and I chatted with her parents, and it was just absolutely lovely. But it was actually good to take that car on, you know, pretty bad roads and such. And you know, I struggle with Lexus sometimes because I think they made a really good car for a long time, and they made a luxury vehicle for a long time, but now, you know, and it's a 3.5 liter V6 engine, so there's plenty of power in it. It was a lot of fun in that regard. 6-speed automatic transmission, you know, easy to get used to, easy to interact with. Like, it was a nice drive, but it's just boring. It's just so boring. There's nothing passionate or emotional about driving these cars. I do have a visceral and emotional reaction to the infotainment system, but not in a positive way.
Well, so I think you're with the GS. It's a nice car and a sort of a time capsule, right? It always it's like 2014.
Exactly. Exactly. Yes.
And their infotainment especially doesn't help, but you know the GS is a car, and I think the reason why they're getting rid of it is that it's just sort of it's stuck in that segment, and now that the heat is off sedans, there's nowhere for it to go. You know, you've got the IS, that probably still does okay.
Right.
But the people who would shop the GS, they're buying the RX.
Well, there's no reason for somebody under 70 to buy this car.
It's too bad because it's a nice car, and like you say, like it feels solid, it drives well. The 6-speed transmission is a little hilarious to me right now because it's not that it's not good. Like I still like a 4-speed,
right,
but it's not competitive.
It's a 6-speed. Yeah. Right. Exactly. Right.
On a spreadsheet, on a numbers,
Right. I mean, there was, again, it's, this sort of soft, floaty, cruising kind of experience. And, it's $58,000.
58?
58. 58.
That's not too bad. You'd spend that on a 5 Series.
But you're getting a 5 Series.
But the 5 Series, okay. I mean, I haven't been in a 5 Series in a while. So when you jump from a GS to a $58,000 5 Series, do they feel like they're at parity?
Well, I haven't been in a 5 Series in a while either. But I was recently in an 8 Series, which is different, I realize. But the idea, though, BMW would never put out a car that didn't have some kind of emotional connection.
Yeah, that's true.
That's the thing is the GS350. I could have been in almost anything. And, and when you're buying a luxury vehicle, some percentage of that purchase is because you want a certain experience and a certain specific experience, or else you just would buy anything. And so that's part of my disappointment with the car. It's not a bad car. Lexus would never put out a bad car. It's just that it does a disservice, I think, to the brand and to this, I want it to be engaging. I want it to be beautiful Japanese luxury, and something that when I get out of the car, I look back at it because I've just had a great driving experience. And that's not what this car unfortunately gives you.
Yeah.
It's not a bad car.
Was it luxurious at least? Was it?
I look at that price point. I think $58,000 is a lot because of what else you can get for that dollar figure. And again, I will be the first one to admit that I bias towards German luxury anyway. So that's out there. But again, I just feel like it was a little on the nondescript side, a little bit like I wanted it to be engaging, and it wasn't. It was fine. It's not the worst. Right. That's the worst.
Well, it makes me wonder though, because I think this is the traditional knock on Lexus, and in the more recent years, they've evolved a bit, where they have put some passion and some of that driving experience into their cars. But in the past, especially when the LS, the first couple decades of the LS, it was it's a dispassionate driving experience. But what you get is it's smooth. All the rough edges are sanded off. It's refined. It's the disconnection is the experience. And so I can see if you are a fan of like Audi or BMW, the driving is part of the experience for those cars. And the Lexus is more, it had traditionally been like, we want you to not worry about that stuff. Just, this is a nice place to sit.
Well, and absolutely. And that's the thing is that, and you're right, that's part of the Lexus experience in some ways. I mean, maybe that is the Lexus experience. I think about luxury as having a personal and engaging experience. If you don't define luxury like that, then you're going to be totally happy in this car.
Maybe we're just not Lexus buyers.
Maybe we're just, but yeah. I mean, I get the mindset, people, certainly most of the Lexus buyers that I see are older people. So especially in a sedan, it's the way it is, but it's something that they have to be very, very aware of, or else they're going to end up like a Cadillac or a Lincoln, where your buyer is, you've aged out of the market. So, and the technology, the engine technology and their fit and finish is too good to let that happen. Like that's, I don't know. It's just, I'd love to see a sportier and a really sportier version of this car. It was very quiet. It was very cocoon-like. All those things are good. And that is what people look for in this vehicle. So in that instance, it does its job.
And,
right.
Granted, Lexus, has moved in that direction of creating a more engaging experience. Certainly the LC and the new LS, live up to that. The RC, the GS, among their cars, the GS is the oldest one that they have. And I think that I don't know if they've said outright that there won't be a replacement for the current GS, but that certainly seems to be the indication, is that there won't be a direct replacement for the GS in their lineup. It's probably, going to last, if this isn't its last year, next year probably will be. I was just looking at the sales numbers. 2019, they sold a grand total of 3,378 GSs in the US. Which was down 49% from 2018.
Wow.
Yeah, but even 2018 wasn't good, huh? That's, geez.
Yeah, it's been on the decline. Even the RC, which is a smaller coupe, which is obviously more of a niche product, sold 4,600 units last year, and it was up 37% last year. So, the only one that sells less is the LC, but that's a much more expensive car than this.
I actually had that. Yeah, I had the LC a number of weeks ago as well, and that was all sorts of fun. That was all sorts of a good time. So, and as you say, if the GS 350 is going away, God rest its soul.
God rest its soul. It doesn't have any. Okay. Well, good. Before we jump to hybrids, let's see. We did the Altima, the GS350, everything else except for what I've got right now in the driveway is a hybrid. So I'll just jump to that. So I have, for the last week or so, I've had the Chevy Silverado Trail Boss, nice. Which is another way you could burn $50,000. So it's about $55,000. It's a nice truck, so it almost feels like with pickups, brands get assigned at birth, right? People are either Ram truck people or Ford truck people or GM truck people or the weirdos that go for the Tundra. But you do well to look around, because there aren't really any bad trucks, and across the board, the frames are rigid, the powertrains are robust, the manners are really good. For 50 years, there's been that sort of North Star of a pickup that's easy to handle, as easy to handle as a sedan, and I think that's definitely been realized with this current crop of trucks. They're all really, really good. The Rams are known for their cushy interior. The Ford gets known pretty well for their EcoBoost performance, and the aluminum body is a thing. So it almost feels to me like General Motors has been hiding in a bit of obscurity for the last couple of generations of their trucks. They've been a little bit more on the conservative side, evolutionary, still good, but the last sort of big splashy GM truck sort of introduction I can remember is the GMT 900s, when that had to be back in 2008, something like that.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, right around there.
Yeah, so that was a big shift, and they were still pretty conservative. And then they've tweaked the formula. These trucks the Silverado was updated not too long ago. I want to say 2016, 15 or 16, something like that.
The current generation?
The current generation was just introduced, right?
Yeah, okay. In 2019.
Yeah. But before that, it was, I think, 2016, 15 or 16. So that's actually short to me. Normally they get a little bit more out of the trucks before they refresh. But I think there were some problems with that earlier generation of Silverado where it just didn't connect, even though it was, relatively lightweight without having to do fancy stuff like aluminum bodies. It was quiet. It behaved well, but it just didn't seem to capture everybody's imagination quite as well. And maybe that's just my impression of it. But this round, they've gotten a little bit bolder with the styling, which is the first thing I really latched onto with the Trail Boss. Is just it's great looking, and I know the Trail Boss package helps because it has blacked out wheels and some blacked out door handles and mirrors and a fascia that's a little different. So it just really it looks good. I think it's cool that they have a name like Trail Boss, like the stuff in the 70s. It was just like cool stickers on the bedside. These are things that I will latch onto. But it's a nice truck, and this is a 4-door. It's the crew cab with I think it's the 5.5-foot bed. So it's the total weekend warrior package, 4-wheel drive. It's got the all-terrain tires on it, which affect the way it drives a little bit. 5.3 liter engine. That's the LT now, right? The LT something.
Yeah, I'm not sure what the code is for that one, but yeah, it's an LT.
It was amusing to me because my 12-year-old wanted to look at the engine, so we popped the hood, and he goes, "That's small," and so I was like, "Well, listen." It's physically tiny, but think of it as a collection of, and I was explaining to him, like, we have in the cabinet, we have glasses, right? We have the tall glasses, the short glasses, and then the juice glasses. And I was like, that's what the size is, not the physical size. So I'm explaining displacement to him. And I don't think he got it, but
using glasses.
Well, yeah, because each cylinder is like,
hilarious.
it's a glass. I was trying to figure out something that he'd understand.
If you ever want to try that with your liquor cabinet, then I'll be in on that. This is a shot glass.
Right. This is a dram. Yeah. He's a little young for that yet. But it's and the 5.3 is it's one of those V8s that on paper, right, its numbers are they're getting encroached upon by the turbo V6s on the lower end. But it just works really, really seamlessly with the 10-speed automatic. Inside, interior-wise, I think it's definitely competitive. It's hard to talk about how these trucks, in terms of outfitting, compare without having them right there, other than to say Ram probably still feels the nicest because they're killing it. The Fords, to me, in my opinion, feel actually the cheapest. I just, for whatever reason, the amount of seams, the plastics, just the way they're put together, I don't feel that they tend to present like they're that price. At least the Silverado interior feels nice. The stuff that it looks nice. The stuff that you're in contact with is generally seems high quality. And it's a truck. It's not a luxury car kind of thing. So it's
priced like one.
I know.
Yeah, exactly.
But there's a lot of there's thought put into it. The controls and switches and stuff are easy to find, easy to operate. They make sense. I did like in the back row, there's a little pull tab in the middle of the cushion for the rear seats, and there's a little storage cubby in there.
Yeah, there's some really nice details like that GM put in those trucks.
Yeah, it's got I think it's got wireless CarPlay, which is nice. It's got plenty of room and storage and good comfort. And just so overall, it's a solid effort in the sort of truck landscape. Even the infotainment is pretty good. It's not the top of the class, but it doesn't make you want to punch it. So that's a win. The thing I like the best about the GM trucks, and I think these are probably my sort of favorite pickups, is they do feel light on their feet. They have I don't know if it's like almost to say like they have a bit of Corvette in them. Like the brake pedal is just solid. They handle tidy. They ride with discipline. They don't beat you up. It's even with the special off-road tires that are like 41 psi. It wanders a little bit on the highway because of the tread blocks will squirm and stuff. The non-Trail Boss trucks probably track like an arrow. It's just you sit even a little lower in it, whereas some of the other trucks you kind of sit on them. You you're a little bit lower seating position, so it almost feels a little bit more car-like in the Silverado. So I just overall, it's a really pleasant environment, and apparently I'm a GM truck guy, so I like to, and it's been really really handy to have around here over the last week or so because the weather is just broken and it's springtime, so I used it like a tractor to drag out a bunch of stuff, and that's been fun. So I will say, in a suburban backyard on a 1/4 acre lot, it'll crawl around the flat grass in 4 low, so you don't chew it up. No problem.
So if I eventually get this truck, I should look for scratch marks underneath. Is what you're saying?
No, I'm not. I did use it to crush a tree stump.
There should be. I mean, if a truck doesn't have some scratch marks on the frame, it hasn't been used. The owner shouldn't be driving a truck.
And it's gone to the transfer station 3 or 4 times, and it's been it's really really its off-road ride there is nice.
That's awesome.
And they paid me $5 for some metal fence I didn't realize I was going to get paid for. I thought that was great.
Look at that.
Like, we paid for metal. It's sweet.
Yeah. Good to know.
Should have dropped the Crown Victoria off there. But no,
like $4.
Yeah. the silver. So in the truck wars, it's hard to. It's like you just define your allegiance, and from an objective perspective, I think the GM trucks, they've restyled them. They've done a few things that make them, I think, better contenders for people who are able to be swayed. Because the diehards are always going to stay there anyway, and I think those changes have been for the better. I really do like the way it looks. I like the way it behaves, and I think price wise, $55K for a somewhat uprated truck, like that's expensive, but it's not Raptor expensive, right? It's not. What's
that's actually like around $50,000 is average transaction price for a new full size truck now.
Right,
it has been for the last year or two.
Right, and I think it's the LT with the Z71, so it's got Rancho shocks and stuff. It's like if their average price is about $50,000 and you're spending about $5K more, that's not bad, right? Like you get a little bit of extra for it.
Yeah, and I'm curious, what kind of fuel economy did you get out of it?
It spent a lot of time idling while I was and pulling, so it was not the most efficient, but it's in the teens. I'd say it's about 18 right now, but on the drive back,
you got that much?
Yeah, that's average. On the drive back, it was all highway when I went to pick it up, and I think it got about 19 and a half on the highway. So,
because when I had a Trail Boss a couple of years ago, I think I got like 14 with it, and I wasn't really doing much work with it. I mean, it was wintertime, I think, when I had it, if I recall, but still, it was not particularly impressive. Although I think the one I had the 6.2 liter, not the 5.3.
Yeah, I love that 6.2 liter, but yeah, you pay for it. That's
oh yeah.
And the 5.3 is surprisingly, it's just really, it's smooth, it's punchy, it's a good engine. I think that if you're towing a lot, you really do owe it to yourself to look at the turbo stuff or the diesels, the light duty diesels now. But as an all around engine, I don't really think you give up anything by going with the 5.3 with the V8 versus one of the V6 options in the other trucks. I think that it's just right in that sweet spot. It has the torque delivery. It's pretty aggressive about auto stopping. So they're doing as much as they can to make it efficient. So.
Yeah. Well, one of the unique features that the GM trucks have on them now, that when they launched those, these were the first vehicles, both of the 5.3 and the 6.2 are the first engines to have what they call dynamic skip fire. It's a technology that was developed by a California company called Tulio. No, I can't remember now. But they've had GM, has had cylinder deactivation for a long time, but it was just, they would shut off 4 cylinders when it was under light load and run 4 cylinders or 8 cylinders. Now it can actually shut off up to 7 cylinders, and it alternates them around. And so I'm curious if you're ever able to notice when it was running on less than 8 cylinders.
Nope. Smooth as silk. Like
Yeah.
then with the MDS, you definitely notice when it would drop to 4 cylinders, and it was still pretty good. But you'd hear the exhaust note change. You'd feel it, even just slightly. I wouldn't have even known that it was doing anything. It's just that smooth. So that's impressive.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool piece of technology. I've actually driven it on a prototype from Delphi, because Tula is the name of the company. They and Delphi worked with them to commercialize it. Delphi had some prototypes of 4-cylinder engines. So, they had a couple of VW Passats that had this on there, and a 4-cylinder engine that was dropping down to 1 cylinder. Like, you didn't even notice it.
Yeah,
It
that's amazing.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a good truck. If I had a spare 55K, I might consider it. I love having pickups in the spring. It's great.
Yeah, spring and summertime, best time to have a pickup.
Yeah.
And to your comments on the F-150, the F-150 now, at least among the domestic trucks, is the oldest, and they're just this week, Ford announced that on June 25th they're going to finally unveil the new 2021 model, which doesn't look dramatically different. I've seen them driving around here, prototypes driving around here for months, but the interior is significantly upgraded, and this is also going to be the first one that gets a hybrid and various other new updates as well.
Yeah, there's no shortage of choice in the truck market, and they're all good in their own way. And Ford, certainly with the F Series, they are on their game, features and capability wise. So I registered for that that reveal, because that's going to be the thing. I can ding it now for sort of having an out of date interior, but I expect that to change. Maybe they'll bring a little Lincoln to it. There's no Blackwood, so they can make a fancy one, because that's the thing. Even the high trim F Series materials and color and just trims and whatever, it just doesn't feel as nice as the higher trim, other
especially the Ram.
Yeah, the Ram is that's a special one.
Yeah.
I think go ahead.
Yeah, well, and so much of the market was caught off guard by the Ram.
Yeah.
They just went bold and forward, and all of a sudden it was like, because they were in third position for so long, and they just, it's impressive what they've done with that vehicle.
Yeah.
And again, everyone kind of got left in the dust with it. So one of the things this week I talked to Jeff Gilbert at WWJ about was actually how low the inventory is on pickup trucks. And this could actually be a little bit of a disruption if people need to buy a truck right away, and the one they want with the specifications that they need are not on the lot. Could we see them going to a different brand for the first time? Because obviously pickup truck loyalty is notoriously high. And so it'll be interesting to see if there's disruption in those loyalty numbers over the next few months as inventory is very low. GM is upping production on these vehicles. So it'll be something to keep an eye on, I think.
Have you seen any inventory numbers on the different brands? Like who's got the lowest inventory?
No, I've just read that GM was very concerned about how low their inventory was at the dealer level.
Okay.
I think you're right, though. I think especially there's that consumer level that it's more of an emotional attachment. You may see those people sort of more easily moved with a fleet buyer. Like if you're buying a municipal fleet, or you need to add 10 pickups to your whatever. I wonder if it's going to be more of a challenge, because a lot of times with a fleet, you commit to a brand so that you can, make sure your service operation can.
You have a stock of spare parts, right, and you don't want to switch from one to another,
right? Because you got to stock 2 items, like they're all the same,
right,
and you can sort of peg the cost, even if you're having somebody else service them. So that'll be interesting to see. I wonder what it's going to do for prices too, with demand still being high. Or at some point, demand's going to come roaring back. And if inventory is low,
by at least 2023 or 2024. Actually, the commercial sector is actually where we're going to see demand where demand is going to get hit the least compared to everything else. I think just, because of, especially, for trucks and for vans, like cargo vans, a lot of those, still going to be a lot of demand for that stuff, especially as people are more reliant on deliveries going forward.
Right, exactly. So it'll be very, very interesting to watch for sure.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about hybrids.
All right.
So Rebecca, we'll circle back to you because you had mentioned that you had the CRV hybrid and it made a lot of noise.
It did. So I had, this is the first hybrid offered in the CRV, which was a great addition to an already really good product. I mean, the CRV is just, it's very stalwart. It's again, not going to be the most exciting vehicle you've ever driven, but it's not intended to be. I love the size of this. It just holds a lot of stuff. I'll post some pictures. I went to Home Depot with it because it is springtime and it's actually nice out, and stuffed a ton of materials in the back, and soils and all sorts of good stuff that I had to buy. But overall the experience was excellent, except for this. Just as soon as you turn the car on, it's actually not bad. Obviously it's very quiet because the hybrid motor is on, but that motor makes this humming noise, and not a pretty like you want to listen to it, as if, Mariah Carey is humming at you. This is like,
what's that like to have Mariah Carey humming at you?
So I had been at my sister's house and swapped out the car there, and my sister and her husband decided to go for a walk, and I actually passed them. Like I stopped when I came upon them, stopped, and my brother-in-law is looking, and he's looking, and he never pays attention to what my sister and I talk about anyway. But all of a sudden he interrupts us and is like, "What is that noise?" That's how loud it was. Whereas, as I'm sitting there, and I actually made a videotape. I taped it before they picked the car up, because I'm hoping that you can hear it in my little tape that I did. But it's, everybody that was around that vehicle commented on it. So again, like I had the car was on, and my neighbor stopped by, and he's like, "What is that noise?"
Is it noticeable from outside as well?
It's noticeable from the outside.
Wow.
It's the motor. It's the hybrid motor, but it just doesn't go away.
Is it like high pitched or like?
Yeah, I mean, it's high. It's clearly a motor sound, and it's just, Jake said, he goes, "How did they let the car out like this?" Like that, that's. I mean, it was, which is unfortunate, because a lot of the rest of it was a very good experience. The estimated mileage is 35 highway, 40 city, 38 combined. I would say I got slightly less than that, but I drove it pretty aggressively, as I normally drive every car aggressively. And I had to laugh because it has one of those little, like, kind of like the leaf thing where it has the measurement, like five clovers or whatever. I never got more than one. So I didn't do so well on the hypermiling kind of thing. But
you must have driven it angry.
I must have done. But, it was good. Otherwise, I liked having the idea of a hybrid around town. I think it's a perfect car for around town. It's not great on the highway in terms of, it has pretty good acceleration. But, you really benefit from it if you're going to be driving a vehicle, running errands, and doing a lot of stopping and starting, and going back and forth, dropping off kids, pets, things like that, going to the grocery store, running errands, all that kind of stuff, like the day-to-day. I think it's a great vehicle for that. The sound was really disappointing, because it was distracting. There was a lot of road noise, and I wish and I ran into this with the Toyota RAV4 and and I think the Highlander as well. There's a tinniness to the doors. Like, there's not a nice kind of thunk to the doors that a lot of other products have. And again, like, we keep going back to brands like Hyundai, but Mazda has this as well. You shut the door and it's a nice, satisfying sound. I have found that Toyota and Honda, there is a tinniness to these doors that is just, I don't know. It's just, again, it's kind of disappointing. Like I described another vehicle, but so this one goes for 37,000 delivered. And the base, I have the touring. So it was the upper trim, 35,950, really fully loaded. I mean, it had everything you could ever want in the vehicle. And overall was just, it was a good hybrid experience. It was just marred by this sound, this noise of the engine, of the motorized engine.
That's kind of surprising because I've driven the Accord Hybrid previously, which has the exact same powertrain in it. It's the same engine, same hybrid drive system, and I did not notice that in there. So I'm wondering, if they have less sound insulation, or maybe there was just something wrong with that particular unit that you had.
But I get that a lot though. Like, why is that? But I drove the hybrid as well, the Accord Hybrid as well. And I don't remember having this. And I ran, what the one that I ran into the same issue was the Mitsubishi, what is that? The hybrid that they have.
Outlander.
The Outlander, yes. Yeah. I ran into that same loud motorized noise. I just was surprised with this. And again, hopefully, Dan, I'll send you the video and maybe you can up the volume on it. I'm hoping that you guys can hear it. And the fact that other people commented on it, again, my brother-in-law, my nephew, my neighbor, it's the kind of thing that people like kind of turn around and they're like, is that your car? That's what somebody asked me, is that your car? I'm like, yes, that's the noise that my hybrid car makes.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see the video because my expectation is that it's probably like the whine from the inverter electronics and stuff that just there's no way to actually make that go away because when you put that amount of electrical energy through just the chips that are in there, they sing, they oscillate, they vibrate, and so it depends, I guess, maybe in the CRV how it's mounted, where that hardware is versus in the Accord. So maybe it's just harder to hide the noise or something. But I don't know.
I mean, I do think that the Accord also has more sound insulation in it. I mean, I don't remember on the Accord when you shut the door, you don't get this tinny sound like you do with the CRV, and it's noticeable. When I looked at the powertrain, I had the hood up. It had one of those. It was so funny because I went to put the hood up and I'm expecting the pressure things to engage, and keep the hood up, and it starts falling. I was like, oh my gosh, because it has this stick.
Has a prop rod.
As that happened, but I noticed that there was no insulation in the lower half of the hood top.
The hood.
Right. Yeah. And, and again, I feel like in the doors, I just want a little bit of a layer, just one layer. And I know, Sam, you're like, that adds weight, blah, blah, blah. Okay. But compensate for it.
Yeah, no, it is surprising. And, one thing that manufacturers have done, to try to overcome some of that noise, over the years is adding active noise cancellation.
Yes.
Especially for hybrid vehicles, and various electrified vehicles, because especially when the engine shuts off, they suddenly become much quieter. One of the things that that manufacturers don't want to do is they don't want to have this sudden change in the environment for the vehicle occupants, and so using active noise cancellation, especially when the engine's running, you can get rid of some of that, especially the low end boominess from the engine, so that transition when the engine cycles on and off becomes less noticeable. And perhaps, maybe part of the problem is maybe the active noise cancellation wasn't working correctly on this, because I'm pretty sure it does have it. So maybe that was faulty on this vehicle.
Yeah, maybe. I didn't think about that.
Yeah.
I mean, because they certainly have access to that. They have that technology within Honda and Acura.
Oh yeah,
and
they have it on the Insight and on the Accord. So
okay, right, and that would definitely make a difference. It would definitely make a difference. But again, overall, I think it's is it a barrier to purchase? I don't think so, especially if your main concern is fuel economy. I think that it certainly checks that box in, for sure. Like if that's what your main concern is, and there's a lot of other good things about it as well. I mean, you're not compromising your entire experience to get 38 miles per gallon, but I do think that it is something that I would want our listeners to pay attention to if they test drive the hybrid version and compare it to the non-hybrid version as well and see what the difference is in experience. But I'll be curious. I'm hoping one of you guys get a chance to drive it again or drive it as well, because I would like to get your experience in this. I don't know. I have really good hearing. Maybe it was one of those weird things.
Yeah. Women do tend to have better high frequency hearing than
we do for children.
I was curious how you felt the acceleration was only sort of okay, like just like tepidly fine, because Honda's touting the CR-V hybrid as the most powerful CR-V, and I'm sure it is total.
Yeah, no, it was good. It was absolutely good. I mean, it handled. I took it on the Parkway, which is very hilly, and it was completely fine on the Parkway. I didn't have any issues with it. Again, the overall experience was positive with this vehicle, so I didn't feel like I was compromised or hampered at all because it had the hybrid engine. I mean, it still has a 2.0 liter VTEC engine in it, so it still has plenty of power. But so I don't want to mislead people and think that it was underpowered by any means. It's not. It was very good from that standpoint.
I think that's the sort of the best. I don't know if endorsement's the right word, but it's like a signpost of how far we've come with this, where it's just it's got the hybrid. You don't give up anything else. There's no batteries in the way of cargo, no real weirdness and stuff.
Yeah, so that's absolutely. I loved that about it. I think it's a vehicle with a lot of livability and a lot of livability appeal. It's easy to get in and out of. Again, the fold flat seats were great. The interior was very nice. It had a nice level of fit and finish. It wasn't crazy they had this sort of weird faux wood metal situation. It was almost like a coppery, in the sunlight, it almost turned a coppery feel. And it was like, it felt very odd.
Well, it's copper to evoke the copper in the motor windings.
Yeah, there you go.
It was kind of the only sort of weird thing in the interior, but otherwise, I thought it was lovely. I actually didn't mind the gear selector was easy to use. All of the ergonomics of it were totally fine. Like I didn't have any issues with it, and not bad fine. Like good fine.
Good fine. Not fine. Like fine.
It was, I always enjoy the types of vehicles where you get in, my phone hooked seamlessly, which was nice. It had a handy charging pad that actually worked really well. And again, there was a lot of, it's an easy car to get to know. So it's familiar. That's the other thing too that was nice about it, was that it was a familiar vehicle as soon as I got in it. And I was like, oh yeah, this is the CR-V. It's very sleek. It has a modern look to it. There's a lot of good things about it. The noise was my only deterrent on what I would consider is an otherwise really, really good experience. I bitch a lot about infotainment systems, but I wasn't crazy about it. There's a weird, like the voice commands are, they go through this, you have to, it's a multiple step. Like
it's very much an older style voice recognition system.
Right. I had to say address, and then I had to say and also just to say, the other thing. The tuning of the radio. There is a volume button And there is not a tuning button.
Yeah,
Why is this difficult?
This is the infotainment system in here is Honda's previous generation system with it's the same system that we have in our Civic, but that they've added a tuning or a volume knob to it, which I was at the reveal of this a couple of years ago, or 2017 when they revealed it here in Detroit, and they announced, and it has a volume knob, and everybody cheered. Which was hysterical because they finally went, because they had had this touch control for the volume before that.
Well, it was the touch control on the screen, and they also had the touch control on the steering wheel spokes. If you swiped it wrong, you'd like crank up the audio.
Yes,
right. So since this system came out, they've got a newer generation, and it does have better voice control. It's still not great, but it has better voice control, and the newer stuff like the Accord and the Odyssey and everything newer that's come out in the last couple of years does have a separate tuning knob as well. So they've learned the lesson and gone back to the knobs for that.
I mean, and I get that they'll tell me that, well, you program in your favorites, and I get all that, but there are just some days that you just want to turn the channel. You just want to turn that knob.
I hear you.
So I think that again, it was very, very clunky. But and I also, and to Dan's point, I also like the fact that it just looks normal. There's a small badge that says hybrid on it. Otherwise, nobody, if you walk by it, you're not going to realize that it's a hybrid. And I like that. I like the normalcy of it. It's a really nice CRV that happens to be a hybrid. So, again, I think I would love to get other people's opinions on whether that the high-pitched whine is an issue for them. If it was just me that had noticed it, I would just say it's just me. But the fact that other people and multiple people in different environments, the fact that other people commented on it, I thought was, was interesting. And also, oh my gosh, I had it in a parking garage. We went into the storage unit, and I had it in the parking garage. It was so loud, echoing off of
the hybrid noise.
The hybrid noise. Again, people turning around, being like, "What is that noise?" Because there's no engine on. So
here's a question though.
It's very amplified then.
Is it one of those sort of noises that they need to add to hybrids so that when it's running?
I don't think this one has
so.
that.
Okay.
Because most hybrids don't really have much of that. And I don't know. I'll have to call, send a note to Robin and see if she can get me into one of these soon, to find out, to compare it against your experience and see if it's any different, to see if it was a one-off issue with the vehicle you were driving, or if this is standard on the CRV.
Yeah, I'd love to get your take on it as well.
Yeah.
I'll take one if they want to send one. So, all right, let's stick with hybrids. Sam, you had the Camry Hybrid.
Yeah, so I went from that Altima right into the Camry Hybrid, and it's a Toyota hybrid, which is that's nothing wrong with that. It's good. It's the it's the same combination that they're putting into a whole bunch of stuff now. They started with the Camry. It's in the Highlander. It's in the new Sienna and Venza that we talked about last time. So 2.5 liter 4-cylinder hybrid. Smooth, quiet, no funky noises. Everything else about this is standard Camry. Nothing out of the ordinary at all. And for good or ill, and really the only not so great thing about it is just the Toyota Entune interface is not great, but we've complained about that before, and we don't really need to rehash that. But especially compared to that Altima, the interior did feel so much nicer. Maybe not quite up to the same standard as the Sonata, which I think is really the new standard of the class, but definitely a big step up from the Nissan. Everything was, all the seams were nicely aligned, and where you've got seams were hidden, nothing that looked cheap, or cost reduced. It all looked really nice, which, again, for roughly the same price as that Altima, it was about $39,000. It's what you expect at that price point. And, this was, the, whatever their top trim level, platinum, I think,
XLE.
or XLE. Yeah, it was an XLE. There's hybrid XLE.
But that's been an issue with the Camry too. Like we've talked about Toyota interiors too, so they've managed to figure it out.
Oh yeah. No, it's definitely, the current generation Camry is, much better than in the past. And, I think, I would still, right now I'd say, the two in the, mainstream car segment, the two best brands for the interiors are Hyundai and Mazda, and we've raved about Mazda for this, for years. And, Hyundai is really great now too. And this is, very close to that standard, so I think everything's really good about this car, and it's decently fun to drive too. Unlike, Priuses of the past.
A Camry Hybrid.
Yeah.
Is fun to drive.
The powertrain is, excuse me, not necessarily what I would call exciting or engaging, but it has more than adequate performance, for a car this size. And, it's the same output as what you get in the Highlander. So, it's going, in a significantly
not too bad.
lighter vehicle.
Yeah.
So, I think it's really good, and the chassis, of the current generation Camry is really good. Rebecca.
I have a question.
Yes.
So if you had a choice, would you take the Camry or the Accord?
Ooh.
I would probably opt for the Accord. I like the Accord a lot too. So that would probably be my preference. I kind of, I know that it's not necessarily a universal thing, but I kind of like the way the Accord looks better. I like the design of that one better, but this is a little more conventional, but compared to previous generations of Camry, it's a little, it's better styled than previous generations. But I kind of like the Accord, that the shape of that, is a little more unconventional without being weird, right, at least to my eye.
Yeah.
I like the Accord a lot, but I wouldn't, this one does not repel me as some past Toyota hybrids have.
Yeah. I really liked the Accord a lot. Yeah. I really enjoyed driving it. There was just a lot to like about it. The Camry's good, but I don't know, there was something very appealing to me about the Accord. Dan, what about you?
I'd agree.
I don't know. The Accord, I think for me, styling wise, is again, like I prefer it. But functionally, the Camry is really well thought out. What's the trunk opening like? What's the interior like? I think the Accord probably has a better feeling interior, but I'm not sure. What's the infotainment like? They're like Honda. They're both like sort of their own brand of sucking, right? Honda infotainment's not great. Toyota infotainment's also not great. So I guess it's sort of like what you put up with, and now with the phone projection, it's not such a huge deal. But I don't know, because the gap between behavior isn't as wide as it used to be. That Camry, the TNGA platform, is really pleasant to drive. I think back to back, the Accord's still going to feel way better. A little bit more sporty. It's going to have actual steering feel and stuff. But I don't know. That's kind of a toss up. I guess I'd have to see how they fit with everything I need from a car, and I probably would have to sacrifice driving enjoyment for functionality, just given where I'm at, and that may tilt things towards the Camry.
Okay. All right, continue, Sam. Thank you.
And I'm at a different stage in my life where I would, my choice would be to, if I'm going to have to choose between functionality and driving enjoyment, I would probably go for the driving enjoyment.
Likewise.
But then again, we opted for, when we went to buy a car, we opted for, a slightly different balance, which, still has the driving enjoyment, but because we got the Civic hatchback, we also have the utility that you can't get in any of these sedans. So it's, it all depends on your personal taste. And that's the great thing about having choices. You have a lot of options, that, there's almost always something that will fit your needs and your wants. And the other great thing, as with all Toyota hybrids, this thing is remarkably fuel efficient. The EPA rating is 46 miles per gallon combined. And I think I averaged 43 over the week I had it.
Wow,
which,
that's amazing.
Compared to the 26, with the Altima, is really amazing. And I was not hypermiling this thing. I was just driving it the way, normally not being ridiculously aggressive and not hypermiling, but just, what I think is, relatively average driving style. And, it's great.
So
that's awesome.
And no weird hybrid, no weird electrical noises.
Yeah. But, and here's the last car that we can finish up with, sort of throws a wrench in this comparison, this Accord versus Camry comparison. Because I had the 2020 Sonata Hybrid, and that does all of the stuff that you just mentioned. It looks great. It drives well. It's very efficient. It feels really premium inside. It's very comfortable. There's no weirdness. And it's just, I feel like it's priced really well. It's a really, really competitive entry. And I think that if you're shopping the other two, you need to look at the Sonata, because it's just, it really kind of raises the bar, I think. I'm very impressed with the Sonata, and it starts with the styling, just the outside. We've seen it in pictures, and some folks have said it looks kind of like it's got a fish face. In person, it's stunning. It just, style-wise, it just looks really, really good. And the impression starts there. And it's interesting how just the way it's designed can make it look premium or not. The Sonata, just the way they drew it makes it look like a higher end car. It's really sharp and really, really pretty. And again, like the functionality wise, like I think you do pay a little bit for that. The trunk lid, it's got a big trunk, but trying to figure out how stuff gets into that opening, because it has this sort of sweeping roofline that everything has. That's something to pay attention to. But on the inside, the cabin of the Sonata Hybrid it almost feels like they took a Genesis level of attention to detail to it, because everything just feels good, is in the right spots. It's easy to use. Hyundai infotainment clobbers Toyota and Honda systems. It's very, very friendly. And the 2-liter 4-cylinder, and this is really smooth. The fuel economy I got, I think it was mid 40s. I forget what I got, but it was very efficient. and you didn't really pay for it. The structure feels really solid. It's quiet. It's smooth. I was just clearly super impressed with it. And I think that if you're looking at the other two hybrids, you may wind up with this one, just because it does so many things right, and in its own way. It's a very good car. Very, very impressive for the Sonata making that jump. It's almost like back in 2006 when they made that first sort of jump to being competitive.
2009.
Yeah, 2009. Like it just, all of a sudden it was a player, and they've continued to do that. They sort of backed off a little bit and got a little bit more conservative, and this is Hyundai again, sort of staking more territory. And I really liked it. I think one of the things that makes it nice to drive too is that instead of a CVT, the Hyundai hybrid system has a 6-speed automatic, so it feels a little more normal. And that does make a difference from behind the wheel. I forget the price of mine, but it had to be high because it had like the solar roof, and I would think it was like limited trim or something. It had lots of stuff. But yeah, I don't know, have either of you tried the Sonata Hybrid?
I have one scheduled for mid-June, so I'll
Yeah.
be getting one in about 3-4 weeks, I think.
Yeah, I'm definitely going to put it on the list. I was just looking too to see, because I think, again, when we compare these things, I think the warranty is better on the Sonata as well. But it will be interesting to see residual value, though. If that's a priority for you, something to keep in mind when choosing. But I mean, I think I think Hyundai's done a really, really good job on that vehicle, and certainly the non-hybrid version of it was wonderful. And so it'll be interesting to see how the sales come out as people get to know this version of the Sonata. That Super Bowl commercial they did with the parking, was certainly memorable. But this hybrid version, there's a lot of cool stuff in it, the solar panels and stuff. There's some neat things with it.
Well, and the ADAS is really good, and
Yeah.
their app where you can set up like preferences through BlueLink, and you can send nav to the car and stuff. Like some of that is not unique to Hyundai, but it's in this car, and it's something that people will appreciate, I think. And like you were talking about with the hybrid noise in the CRV, this is quiet.
Yeah, that's so
it's
interesting.
a nice place to be.
Yeah, they just looking at the pricing, the Sonata Hybrid Limited starts at $35,300, and there's not a lot of options available. I think probably it looks like if you took all the available options, you'd still be probably no more than about 37, probably about 38 with delivery. So cheaper than either of the sedans I drove.
And neither of the ones you drove have the fancy trim strip that lights up.
Oh yeah, that is so cool.
It does look cool. It looks really neat.
Yeah, and it's funny that they when the lights are off, it looks like just a standard piece of chrome trim that runs up from the headlights along the edge of the hood. But what it actually is the plastic has a metallic coating on the underside. It's kind of like a two-way mirror.
Yeah.
And so when you light it up from behind, it lights up. And they did the same thing last year at the LA Auto Show on the concept that Hyundai revealed, which was basically a preview of the next generation Tucson. They did that for the headlights. So they had the same kind of thing. In the grille, you had this kind of diamond pattern grille, and on the outside, on the outer edges of it, you had some of these diamonds that had this metallic coating on there, and then they turned the lights on, and the lights just shine through it. It just looks really neat. I don't think that'll be legal for the headlights themselves, but for running lamps and signature lighting, it works for that.
Yeah, I was struck by how the styling differs between when you see it in pictures and in person. I got a real, almost like a classic Oldsmobile feeling from it, right? Like the mid '60s Oldsmobiles are sort of like, in my mind, a benchmark for being a little bit up from your sort of basic car. They have a bit of flash to them, but they don't. They're not like a Cadillac, right? Like
I can't even stand the GM love you're giving this morning. It's
shorthand. I'm
right
not like a GM person. It's just I really did like Oldsmobile, but it gave me that impression, like this is what you would. It's sort of like the modern analog for it. It has a lot of expressiveness, a lot of sort of just classic understatement. It's not a gimmicky design, but it looks sharp, and it's going to look sharp for a long time. So that's, I think I might have told you, Rebecca, like last week. It was like the Germans they bought are doing good work.
Yeah, but the Germans have left.
Not all of them.
No, not all of them. But Luke leaving was a huge.
Yeah,
he was a head designer. Sanyip is wonderful, but he's Korean, and it's a different mentality. I mean, obviously he's learned a lot. They've collaborated, the two of them in particular, but I don't know what went on with Luke, so that was a surprise.
I don't
and
know.
then they also, well, this was Genesis. Genesis lost this young, really hip designer who always looked like he was going to a rock concert as opposed to a press event. But he recently left as well. So it will be interesting to see how they evolve from a design standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, this car it's very thoughtfully drawn, inside and out.
It is.
It's lovely. Yeah, we had a lot of cars.
Yeah. So shall we tackle some news?
Yeah, let's talk about news.
How about the TLX?
Speaking of nice designs. Yeah, well, what did you guys think? I'll throw it out there before I
love
the
it.
earth.
You know, I think that it's clearly when they showed the S-Type concept last summer at Pebble Beach, it was obviously a preview of this, and this is a only very slightly toned down version of that concept, which is fairly typical of Honda and Acura. They rarely produce really wild out there concepts. The last time Acura did it was 4 or 5 years ago with the Precision concept, which kind of set the stage for this new design language for Acura. And then the S-Type concept was clearly the preview of this car. The proportions of this new TLX are totally different from the existing one. They've done that, like others are doing, changing the dash to axle ratio in the front to make it look more like a rear drive car. It's much a much more aggressive looking design than the previous generation TLX was.
I think it's gorgeous. It's really cool. And, think about what we talked about earlier with Lexus sort of, not totally taking advantage of their racing heritage and their acumen. But I mean, this car looks, the TLX, especially the Type S, it looks fast. It looks emotional. I think it's spectacular. I love the front end. The grille is much smaller than a lot of other vehicles are doing these days, for better or for worse. Like, that's purely a preference. The back, I love those quad exhausts. Those are super cool. I think it looks great. And you're absolutely right, Sam. The proportion of it is very, very different. The side view is dramatically different. It definitely has rear wheel drive proportions to it. It's really, really cool.
Well, and it marks the return of the double wishbone suspension, which was a Honda Acura thing for a very long time, and it was sort of part of their secret sauce of just how it handled and performed.
Yeah.
So it's interesting to see that come back. Like they're drawing on heritage, and I mean, it's hard to look at the TLX and see a bad looking car. It really does. It's a really, really nice design. Yeah.
And I think this personifies, what last year at the Detroit Grand Prix at dinner, I was sitting with John Ikeda, who's the head of Acura. And, we were talking about, what is Acura? What is the Acura brand? Because for so long, it seemed like Honda wasn't really sure what it wanted Acura to be. And, he made it very clear. He articulated very clearly that, Acura is going to be the performance brand for Honda. So it's going to be all about performance and design for going forward for Acura, rather than, trying to compete, as more of the pure luxury brand, but, just premium performance. And I think this, assuming that it lives up to, what it is on paper, and I fully expect it to, it will definitely meet that. So, powertrains, all turbocharged powertrains this time around. The base engine is the same 2-liter turbo that you find in the RDX, and it's a slightly detuned version of the Civic Type R engine. 272 horsepower, I think, or 276. And then for the Type S, which will be coming a little bit after launch, there's an all new 3-liter turbo V6, which is going to be unique to Acura, which I don't think they've had. Aside from the NSX, I don't think Acura has ever had an engine that is unique to that brand. So who knows how long it'll stay Acura only, but for now it's going to be an Acura only engine. And they haven't given any specs on that other than just saying, it'll be more. So I would guess it's probably going to be somewhere between 350 and 400 horsepower.
Wow. Yeah. But I love that though. I mean, they have to do more of that differentiation. I'm still stuck on the side profile because it's just gorgeous, but like the belt line, the proportion of the greenhouse to the belt line is so nice, because we've talked about belt lines and greenhouses before, how sometimes they're so narrow that it actually encroaches on visibility. But this has just the perfect ratio between the two. The other thing this is very detailed, but is I love the fact that the side mirror is actually two-tone. So the top of it is black to blend in with the windows, and the lower part of it is white to blend in with the car body. I wonder if that will continue.
It's body color.
Right.
Yeah.
But it's two-tone though, which I think is kind of cool. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out with more colors and what they do. But no, I think that, and back to the original point of differentiation, I think they have to, this is how you justify those higher price points. And this is also how you move people into your luxury brand from a strategy standpoint, because the mainstream brands are becoming so good, people have less incentive to move into the luxury version of that product. Like, you have to give them a reason to say, this is why you need to buy an Acura versus a Honda. And that reason needs to be very clear and justifiable.
Yeah. Well, and I think too, like for Acura, the opportunity exists to sort of stake out performance in a way that may have been crowded before, as we see other brands like Audi and BMW shift toward being luxury and tech. And Acura's kind of already there with luxury and tech in their own way. But even the film, the little video that they use to just sort of announce the car, it shows it, with a little bit of tail out around a curve, and they actually did like a J turn in the video too. So it makes me think that they've paid attention to how it feels from a driving performance perspective, which is I think going to be important. It was like always the sort of the territory of the traditional German brands is like, yes, you can get a lot of the value elsewhere, but nothing drives like a BMW. And that, I think, with Acura in particular, the last few times I've driven their cars, they really have that sort of sporty soul that is really, really pleasing, that you don't necessarily have in sort of a price like a price parity 3 Series or whatever,
or even Lexus or Infinity. Yeah. Infinity is typically more performance oriented anyway, but there definitely is opportunity to pull in buyers looking for more excitement than they may experience at the Lexus showroom.
Right. And you have that sort of the ability to offer that performance, that level of excitement, plus the luxury, plus the reliability of the track record of who Acura is. And so I'm excited for it. I will also go on record as being biased. I really like Acura cars. So, take what I say perhaps with a grain of salt.
Well, the current generation TLX A-Spec, when they finally brought back the A-Spec, I thought, was really good.
I loved that car.
Much better than the other trim levels. And, I think take that, and their latest generation of their super handling all-wheel drive, their torque vectoring all-wheel drive, which has always been really wonderful, when you're driving aggressively, it works great. I'm really looking forward to trying this out, both A-Spec and in the Type S.
Well, if I recall right, the super handling all-wheel drive system in the current TLX, it overdrives, right? So that's where you can get some of that rotation when it engages the rear axle. It can, because it has an overdrive ratio, it it can get that rear axle to try to pass the front, you know, and that
right. Well, it's always done that since they initially launched it back in the early 2000s.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's done that torque vectoring, you know, so it will actually, you know, there's an electronically controlled clutch pack in the rear axle that can shift the torque to one side or the other.
Yeah.
So, you know, it will send more torque to the outside rear wheel, which helps the car turn in. So even though, you know, this is a base front wheel drive, you know, transverse mounted chassis, you know, you that torque vectoring actually helps it turn in better, you know, so it feels more like a rear wheel drive car. And, you know, they can also change the bias front to rear as well, which they do, you know, to give it more of that rear drive bias. So the combination of those factors, you know, really helps it turn better.
Well, I also thought that here it is in the press release. In addition to the torque vectoring, the rear axle ratio is 2.9% overdrive. So you get actually more yaw out of it, because it's not like a 1-to-1. So that's a really neat trick, and it works really, really well.
Yeah.
It just makes the car really, really fun to drive. So
I am a little disappointed they're not offering a manual, only because the Civic manual is so good. So that would have been a fun thing.
It's going to have paddles, right? It'll have paddles.
Yeah.
They'll have those flappy paddles.
Yeah, just because, you know, the Civic one is such a fun manual to drive.
Yeah.
But there it is. 9-speed automatic.
Well, hopefully, you know, when they bring out the replacement for the ILX, which, you know, I've talked to the Acura folks, you know, at some point there's going to be a replacement for that. Hopefully that car will, with any luck, they will finally bring back the Integra name, you know, and make that.
I had two. I used to have two.
Can you imagine an Integra Type S?
That's
awesome. with the full on, you know, Type R powertrain, but, you know, in a more sophisticated body style.
That's awesome. And I just have to correct myself. It's actually 10-speed automatic transmission in the 2021. The 2020 has the 9-speed. That would be awesome. That'd be awesome.
All right. How about the Ford police vehicle story?
That's, you know, we bitch enough about how things have become so software driven and they've taken all our buttons away and all that nonsense. But I without giving the outline of the story, I suppose we should back up. So
because you should click on Sam's story on Forbes.
Yeah, right. And where you'll find that Ford has a little disinfectant hack where they've allowed the interior temperature of their police vehicles to rise to 133 degrees as a little disinfecting cycle to kill any COVID-19 virus or you know, a lot of other stuff too. And that's a really great example of things you can do that you couldn't do before, just with a very simple change. And it really, like, it's not that hard, and it's really imaginative. And I was really impressed that they thought that way. It's like sideways thinking. And Ford seems to be good at that. And a you know, a lot of recent examples, they're very clever. And I think that's just another example of putting that clever thinking into action. So I want it on my cars now.
Well, do you really want to heat up your cabin of your car to 133 degrees for 15 minutes?
You're not in it for that time, right? Like, but there are some days where that might feel quite nice.
Yeah.
But it's cool because, like, before, right, with like an analog based HVAC system, the controls wouldn't allow it to get that warm. You know, you'd have
right. I mean, even electronic, you know, automatic climate control systems today typically max out at somewhere around, you know, in the mid, like 84, 85 degrees, you know, and that's what they did here is they just did some software changes to, you know, allow the hotter coolant to run through the heat exchanger for the cabin air, and, you know, change the limits, you know, to allow it to get up to 133 degrees, which is enough to bake all of the virus, you know, kill the virus, you know, that might be in the cabin of the car. So at the beginning and end of a shift, you know, they can run this cycle, and, you know, if they've been transporting anybody who might have been ill, you know,
take them out first.
Yeah, take them out first, please. But you can press a sequence of buttons, cruise control buttons in a particular sequence, and it'll engage this heating mode. They get out of the car, let it sit for 15 minutes, and then they can get back in, and it's all good. So
it's a great idea. It's super clever.
Yeah, and I expect we'll see. Now that Ford's done it, I expect we'll see. Ford and GM do the same. With their police vehicles as well. It's probably not something that's real practical for individuals, and you probably don't really need it for individuals, but perhaps for taxis and some ride-hail vehicles, it could be useful for that.
So. It's an option I would like to have the ability to do. Just put it into disinfect mode.
Yeah. All right. Next one.
Speaking of Ford.
Another one from Ford. The Mach 1, which we've talked a little bit about in the past. It's official. They've announced it officially this week that the Mustang Mach 1 is coming back because the GT350 is going away at the end of the 2020 model year.
That's so sad.
And so they're going to do limited production Mach 1, which all they've really said about it is that it's going to be the best performing 5-liter Mustang ever. But they haven't said anything else.
It's not saying much, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm still speculating that this could be a hybrid Mustang, because when I was at the backgrounder for the Mach E last fall, on the timeline that they had in the design studio, they showed 2021 Mach E, Mach 1, and they promised a hybrid Mustang for 2020, and this would be an interesting combination. You take the hybrid system that's in the Explorer, add that to the 5-liter. And a couple of years ago, I was talking to Tom Barnes, who was the vehicle development manager for Mustang, or vehicle engineering manager. That's it, for Mustang. He said that the hybrid they were working on was going to be a really high performance hybrid. So this would make sense that this might be the one. Because if you took the 5-liter, the version of the 5-liter that's in the Bullet, which is 480 horsepower, and the hybrid motor, the electric motor that's in the Explorer Hybrid, which is another 44 horsepower, now you're at 524 horsepower, almost the same as the GT350, and you've got an extra boost of low end torque as well because of that electric motor. That could be a very interesting Mustang. The only problem is no manual transmission with that.
Rebecca's crying.
It just another day, another topic.
I'm sad about the GT350. God,
I know.
I love that car.
Yeah.
It's so
I do too.
Loud and
glorious.
Yeah.
I do think the addition of a hybrid, though, would be very interesting because, as we've talked about on this show in particular, that normalization of a hybrid experience, I think that would be really cool to see how, and if they can get instant torque, like they can utilize it to make it an even more powerful, more fun experience, go for it. It'd be really cool.
I think you're over the hump of acceptance as well. I think the driving is going to be the real differentiator, where you might scratch your head and say a hybrid Mustang. That's a little weird. It seems a little beyond the mission of the Mustang to be efficient and to drive it and say it's not about efficiency. It's about performance.
Dare we say this is not your father's hybrid?
Yeah,
no, please don't say that, because you know what happened the last time they said that? That brand went away completely.
Yeah. Speaking of Oldsmobile again, do you know that campaign is what led to Mel Blanc passing away?
What?
He was on a shoot. Yeah. So this is not your father's Oldsmobile campaign. Had Mel Blanc and his son as one of the sort of vignettes, and during the shoot or just after the shoot for the ad, he fell and broke his hip, and he wound up in the hospital, and he got an infection in the hospital.
Oh man, that sucks.
Because of Oldsmobile. He was
such a genius.
Wow.
I know.
They just launched HBO Max this week, and I was watching some Looney Tunes cartoons the other day.
They're amazing.
Oh, I know. Brilliant.
And just because of what we do at work is so animation based, like there's just that history of like all the, the guys who came out of Warner Brothers with Looney Tunes, and then there's a lot of crossover with Disney, and there's this guy Ub Iwerks who really was a lot of the genius behind Disney stuff, and a lot of the animation he did was kind of blue. So when they when Disney was like, look, we need your expertise, but we have rules here. Because it was before the codes and stuff. And so it was just really fascinating. We're completely off topic. So
yes, we are.
Get back to the topic of, would it be it would be still rear wheel drive though? They wouldn't try to do like a hybrid on the front axle. So it gets...
No, I don't, not on this current generation Mustang. I don't think they could package a front drive system in there.
Because that would be seriously interesting.
Yeah. I mean, the next generation Mustang, very possibly. But I think on this current car, I don't know that they could. And, given that this car is already, there's a new one coming in 2022 anyway. I don't think that they would make that investment in doing all-wheel drive on this current generation Mustang.
Wow.
Huh. They could do wheel motors, right? It's just like a whole bunch of unsprung mass, whatever.
Yeah, because the thing you really need, with those big 6-piston Brembos in the front and 15-inch calipers or 15-inch rotors is more unsprung mass on the front wheels.
Yeah, and the motors, it's only like another 30 pounds per. Yeah. But no, I mean, I think that it's the future of high performance cars. Is hybridization, and so I won't be surprised. I'll be really, really impressed and interested to see how they do it, though.
Yeah, I mean, there's no guarantee. I mean, it might just be the bullet engine, with something like the Performance Pack Level 2 suspension or a tweaked version of that, so 480 horsepower, or it could be something else completely different. Hopefully, it'll be something different. But we'll see.
No complaints. If they're going to make cars that perform, I'll take it.
All right. One last one before we get to a couple of listener letters. Andy Palmer, he is no longer the CEO at Aston Martin. Rebecca, what do you think?
Yes. So this is a tough one because I think he's such a champion for that brand. And the Aston Martin brand, I've worked with them a number of times, particularly at Pebble Beach, where I was a judge for 2 years. I helped them judge a class of basically gate and built V8s. And talking to the owners, like I still have my notes from my initial conversations with these people because they're incredibly passionate about their ownership experience and about what Aston Martin means and the aspiration and the goal of finally buying an Aston, and whether it was new or used, it didn't matter. And Andy personified so much of that. This is kind of a kid that came up from nothing and became the president of Aston Martin worldwide and oversaw expansion and oversaw the IPO. And unfortunately, I think the IPO was his downfall. The stock price was just dreadful for a number of reasons. I think the timing of the IPO was really tough. They've got Brexit to deal with. COVID was, just another nail in the coffin. I think that Lawrence Stroll has invested hundreds of millions of dollars into the company to revive it. Aston Martin actually has gone bankrupt, I think 8 times, and has always been saved by the owners, which says a lot about that ownership experience. Looking over some of the Twitter feed and such, when first of all, how Andy found out is horrible. He found out from an FT reporter calling him on a Saturday, and that's not okay. So so Aston Martin really mishandled that. He deserved much, much better than that. But the new guy coming in from Mercedes, AMG, and the first thing that people were asking for on social media was, where is his Twitter account? Because this is how they interact with each other. There's 2 things that they do. Saturdays is Cars and Coffee at Home, which is a little bit more US based, but you basically, it doesn't have to be an Aston Martin, but it certainly helps. You show pictures of cars that you're with, and obviously instead of being able to meet with each other. So they have this really fun campaign that everyone participates in. but you know, is on social and it's a big deal. And then Sundays is hashtag a stun day, and you again, owners will show pictures on Sundays of themselves driving around with their Aston Martins. It's just it's a group of very gregarious, camaraderie filled people and owners of these, you know, beautiful, highly valued, very expensive cars, but with an approachability to the brand that I don't think is fostered in a lot of other brands. You know, you don't see these kinds of things from Rolls-Royce, you know, or from Lambo. It seems to be very specific to Aston Martin. So I think that once Lawrence came in, I think that Andy's days were numbered. You know, Penny Hughes was the chairman of the board of Aston, and she got booted a few months ago. And if anything, I was more surprised that Andy lasted as long as he did. I was hoping they would let him see through to the DBX launch, the SUV launch, because that's really been something that he championed. Obviously, it got delayed because of COVID, so that was the DBX was supposed to launch in April. I was sad to see him go, and I'm sad to see how it happened and just the timing of it. So I wish the new guy, I can't remember his name. I should have it right. Tobias, that's right. Yes. Coming from AMG, you know, he's done an incredible job growing that brand. But if I was ever given the opportunity to talk to him, I would tell him that you've got to engage with these owners because they want it, they demand it, and it's a way to keep them loyal to this brand.
What if any impact do you think this is going to have on the product plans that Aston Martin has announced? They've announced this plan to bring out this range of new mid-engine cars. Starting, obviously you've got the Valkyrie as this halo. Then new mid-engine Vanquish and a couple of other models.
So a lot of that will be dictated by Lawrence Stroll because he is a key investor. He's actually already canceled things like, or put on hold, postponed the relaunch of the Lagonda brand as an all-electric brand. He's like, time out. I think that everything is up for discussion right now. One thing I should have mentioned too is that Mercedes supplies Aston Martin with engines, and so there has been some and infotainment system as well. So there had at least one infotainment system. I don't know if it's across the board, but there has been a collaboration with these two companies before, so it's not entirely surprising that they pulled somebody from AMG. I think that Lawrence is looking at every decision, every product. I think he'll, first of all, they've just got to get their balance sheet back. They've got to get their stock price back. They've got to launch this DBX. Everything rests on this DBX. So it's a beautiful vehicle. I've sat in it. I haven't driven it. I sat in it actually more than a year ago, and I loved the proportion of it. I definitely got some behind the scenes feel for it, and based on the videos that have come out and that have been shot, and the initial sales orders, I think it will be very successful. I have a Vantage this week that I'll talk about in our next podcast, and I was thinking to myself, it's such a fun car, but it is very small. I mean, you can toss it around like nobody's business, but how I would love to be in a DBX to run, to do more around the town errands with it, and the opportunity to drive something as beautifully made and beautifully done as an Aston in an SUV, I think is going to be a fantastic opportunity. So I think that Stroll will take every decision carefully and really look at it from a business and non-emotional side. I have good friends that are good friends with him and that have worked with him. And we were talking about it last night, and, he's not a man to be trifled with. He doesn't suffer fools. I think maybe one of Andy's downfalls was that he was too emotional potentially and too invested in this brand. So I think that both between Tobias and Lawrence, they will be making decisions that are very, very much based on balance sheet.
Well, and there's been their stock price took a bump up when the announcement came out. I don't know where it sits today, but the market sort of responded. at least in the UK. Can we still call it the UK?
Yeah,
Yeah,
right.
it's still the UK.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's just not part of Europe anymore.
Right.
Okay. So there it was up when they announced on the 26th that the stock was up at least.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I think people unfortunately lost confidence in Andy because of the stock price.
Yeah, well, that's sort of like the double-edged sword. Like, why did it need to be a public company? And I think it's mostly that the investors would like a return, or they'd like a higher multiple on their return. And we've seen this, right? When you take a company public, you shift the responsibilities of the company for better or for worse. When it's a public company, they're a car maker, but really their job, their primary product is shareholder value, right?
Right.
So you can kind of look at that a little cynically and see if that's going to actually last, or if it will be the downfall of the company having gone public. But the long gestation of the DBX is sort of another problem, right? Like it was just taken forever. And like you say, like the classic Astons, they're cool. And they're definitely, they're like the 911, right? Like not everybody's going to buy a 911, but there's a lot of people who want a Porsche that would definitely fork over for a Cayenne. So the fact that it's taken so long for the DBX, like you sat in it a year ago, like you said, it's just.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, I was surprised when we were talking about it back in June of last year, when I first saw it and sat in the prototype. And they were talking about in April. I was like, April? I mean, I kept expecting it to be by year end. Like, I thought that's when the launch was going to be, in that December, November, December timeframe. So I don't really know what the delays have been. There's a ton of opportunity. China, 50% of all Aston Martin buyers in China are women. Which is significant. And so, this DBX could make that even more extreme. Obviously, it's not how it is in any other part of the world, but yeah, the delays have certainly not helped their situation.
Yeah. Well, it sucks for Andy. I hope that he lands softly somewhere, because he does seem like a genuinely nice guy and passionate.
Yeah.
And, I identify with that. So.
Yeah.
Something that you aspire to be someday.
Yeah, genuinely nice guy. Yeah.
And soft. No, that's not.
Let's get to questions.
Okay. So first one, not really so much of a question, is from Sean in Seattle. I was listening to the Leaf discussion while washing the last two-wheel drive 4-cylinder Japanese wagon, and he included a photo of his garage, which includes a red Acura TLX wagon, which was a lovely car. And it'll be a sad day when it needs to be replaced. We picked up our Leaf used, and it's a first generation Leaf, and ditched a Honda Civic. The Leaf is a perfect second car. Hopefully the e-tron or I-Pace will plummet in price when the Leaf needs to be replaced. And I'm sure that the prices will be substantially lower than what they are today. I don't know if I'd necessarily say plummet. I don't know if they'll be in the right ballpark to replace a used Leaf, which, used Leafs, we've talked about this. You can get used Leaf, especially a first gen Leaf, for a song, and a lot of the other
$7,500.
Yeah, a lot of the the early 2010s EVs, up until the current generation, they're well under 10 grand now. And if you need something like that, as a round town commuter, obviously not for long distances, but for something with 60, 70, 80 miles of range, a vehicle like that is an awesome choice for you.
You could probably get an I-Pace that cheap soon. Used Jaguars just go
yeah,
right off the cliff.
By the time you need to replace this Leaf, you may well be able to get an I-Pace in that price range.
And that's a cool car. Actually,
yeah.
it's really
it's gorgeous.
It's just neat to look at that and see all of the sort of engineering that you don't necessarily pick up until you start to look at it closely.
Okay. So the other one was from RD, from Ray Davis. Says, really enjoy the podcast and listen to all the new episodes. Thank you, Ray. We appreciate that. And tell all your friends. I think I heard Sam
Just send
mention that
money.
you own a relatively new Honda Civic. I'm considering purchasing a Civic EXL and want to know what you think about the hatch and non-hatch models. Does the EXL non-hatch handle better than a hatch? And does either version have a quieter ride, less road and wind noise? So yeah, we own a 2017 EX hatch, not an EXL, but an EX. And we love it. As far as the handling goes, I've driven a number of, current generation Civic sedans and hatchbacks of various trim levels, from the base, or at least from a hatch sport, which is basically the base hatch, the LX, but with bigger wheels and about 4 more horsepower, all the way up to the various touring trim levels, and of course the Type R. And I've never really noticed, at a given trim level, with the same tires on there, I've never really noticed any significant difference in the handling between one or the other. Have either of you noticed any noticeable difference in the behavior of a hatch versus a coupe or sedan?
I haven't, and I'm very biased towards hatches though, because they're just so darn practical.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that the driving experience is compromised by a hatch. I certainly don't recall it being any louder than a sedan. I totally understand why he would be concerned about that, but I love the practicality and the usefulness of a hatchback.
I was going to say, I think that the bigger concern would be the noise level difference. And I've noticed in some, I can't say that the Civic specifically, it's been a while since I've been in one. But usually when you have the hatch down, you got that the cargo cover in place and the back seats up, the noise levels are fine. It's when you fold the seats down and start to use it for cargo, which isn't all the time, that you're probably going to get a little bit more road noise. But overall, I don't think I could say that the hatch or the sedan handles any differently. The bigger difference with the Civic obviously is the trim levels, and so something like the Sport or the SI is gonna handle noticeably different than the EX.
Yeah, and I think in the case of this generation of Civic, because Honda designed the hatchback, designed it, with the Type R in mind, being the high performance version of it. I think that they made sure that there was no degradation in structural integrity with the hatchback. I know back in the in the 80s, 70s and 80s, if you, especially like with the first generation Golf as an example, when they launched the original Jetta, and you put that up against a Gen 1 Golf, there was a difference in the rigidity, and also things like even like a Fox body Mustang, for example, from the 80s, the hatchback, the GT hatchbacks versus the sedan, the coupe. There was a noticeable difference in rigidity because you had a unibody with a big hole in the back, and there was a difference. But I think that that's something that with modern engineering techniques, and materials, they've figured out how to overcome that, and really make hatchbacks be just as tight as a sedan. As you said, Dan, with if you have the seats folded down and the cargo cover out of the way, you might notice a little bit more boominess or echo in there, just because you suddenly have a much larger volume there.
Yeah.
But in terms of structural integrity, I've never really noticed any difference, and so I don't think that that's really a problem.
My favorite Civic is actually the Insight, which they don't make as a hatch, which is kind of too bad. I wish they made that as a hatch, because that's such it's just a really nice car. It's calming. It's got a certain serenity to its driving experience.
Very zen.
Yeah, absolutely.
For you.
Yes, as I'm constantly seeking serenity. So.
All right. I think that's about it for this week.
Cool.
Yeah, we've done another show, and we'll come back next time and have some more. So send the questions, and you know where to find us.
All right. And unfortunately, we still haven't received that check from Spotify, but if you are a Spotify listener, you can listen to Wheel Bearings on Spotify. It's there, it's in their directory. And we'll be here waiting for that check, Spotify. Joe,
I think you need to have like 9 million plays before you get a dime, like an actual dime.
Maybe that's it. Well, I mean, they just bought Joe Rogan's show for $100 million. So
maybe that's it. Maybe we're just not whack job enough.
That could be it. I don't know.
That could definitely be it.
But and you can also find us everywhere else you can listen to podcasts. On the web or in any podcast player of your choice. You can find us there, whether it's Apple Podcasts or Overcast or Pocket Casts or Google Podcasts. We're there on all of them now. So thanks, everybody.
See ya.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Stay safe out there.